that I have chosen to work on, and that is ecological economics. Most of the diagrams, discussions, theories that I'm bringing in is from the book of Daly and Farley. If you are interested, you can always look at this book, and therefore I have put up the source here. And it basically takes you a step ahead of environmental economics. Okay, so the first thing that we need to understand is the basic fact about our global economy. What actually is a global economy that we talk about? So if you look at this diagram here, what does it tell you? It basically indicates that economy is a subset or a part of a larger system. And what is that system? That is the ecosystem which we are trying to restore, right? And the ecosystem is an open system. Why it is an open system? Because it can import as well as export both energy and matter. Whereas, the global economy is an open system because it can it can import and export both energy and matter. Whereas if you look at the ecosystem, the earth, the environment, you can import and export energy, for example, sunlight, but you don't see matters falling on you. I mean, it is given to you and it is their finite resources. You cannot think that more and more resources, more oceans will come to you, more rivers will come to you. That's not the case. That's given to you. Forests are given to you. But economy is something which you can grow, where you can grow, but using the resources provided to you by this ecosystem. And we are basically an agency. All other living species, we are all, including human beings, are agencies who try to, utilize these resources, who try to make most of these resources, who breathe the air which is given to us, who need sunlight to live. So we are nothing but we are actually agency in this larger ecosystem. So that's what is actually the main important fact about the global economy. Now, do we really look at our economy and environment relationship in this way? Unfortunately, we don't. So how do we look at it? If you look at the neoclassical way of articulating the economy and environment, it is absolutely the other way around. How we look at it is that economy is the whole, meaning everything that is there is the economy. What is the role that environment plays? Environment is a subset of economy. What it provides us is resources. The way I use the term resource is actually not correct, because forest is not just a resource, water is not just a resource, but we have been taught to use or to look at them as natural resource. Okay, so I'll come to the point where now we have started to calling it not anymore as natural resource. We have started to call it as a natural capital. And why we have renamed it as natural capital? That is because, like any other capital, you have to invest on this particular capital to ensure that it continues to exist. If you only look at it as natural resource, then you will never, invest so much, because economists like to invest a lot on capital so that capital remains there. And so we have started to rename or relook at it that it's a capital. If you do not invest, if you do not keep it, if you do not restore it, then your economy also cannot continue forever to grow. So when you look at the economy and the environment relation in this way, one of the biggest concern here is that we feel that, we are too small, and, what is biosphere or what is ecosystem? It's too big, and, our growth cannot have any impact on it. If today I am chopping one tree, how does it matter? There are so many. That's the way we look at the relationship. We also feel that when we are chopping 10 trees and building a house or a market complex or whatever we are, or a bridge, whatever we are, which we call it as a man-made capital, by replacing this natural capital, we are actually not really displacing anything. Why? Because we don't see any value compared to the value of a man-made capital. So the value of natural capital, that is trees, are much smaller compared to the value of man-made capital, which is going to connect you as an infrastructure with the rest of the world. So obviously, if you ask any economist, or in fact, for that matter, anybody would say that, of course, we need good connectivity, we need good roads, we need good bridges, we need an urbanized, city. So we don't really realize what we are losing in trying to acquire these of the urbanized, kind of classification, what we can say, what we are basically losing in the process. And so we don't give up anything. The result is that we are not giving up because of this physical expansion. We are as if these are all unoccupied spaces, and we are growing. So if you have visited some cities such as Hyderabad, you go to the city of Hyderabad today and you visit the city of Hyderabad, say 5-6 years later, you would see that what it was there some 5 years back as the boundary, it has changed completely now. It is no longer, the boundary has expanded like anything. The physical expansion is so much. So why are we doing this? Because we feel that these are all unoccupied spaces, and so we can grow. And that is the exact case with wetlands too. We don't really see the benefits or importance of wetland and the cost of encroaching these different, natural capital. So this is what the second slide is about. I am sure you all know about opportunity cost. As an economist, we have learned this. It's basically talks about the cost of any activity measured in terms of value of the next best alternative foregone. So what happens is when you feel that the value of not having an overbridge, not having a market complex, not having a mall, for example, is higher, then removing the forest, removing the wetlands, then we say that the opportunity cost of these wetlands, etc., removed is too less. And as such, we feel that physical growth, even if it is encroaching all of our finite and non-growing whole, there is hardly any opportunity cost there. And when we keep doing this, we are actually taking away a lot of these important natural resources. Then why? Why do we look at growth to be so important? One of the reasons the entire growth process started because we felt immediately after independence, we had so much of poverty, unemployment. We also had a huge population which started to in fact grow eventually, although it wasn't so much in the initial time, but it started to grow. We had to ensure everybody has access to everything, particularly there should be more and more growth so that everybody's standard of living improves. So the ideal solution was to grow, to eradicate poverty, to remove unemployment, and also to ensure that our population is well nourished, and living a good standard of life. But at some point of time, we did not realize this at the macroeconomy level, it was costing us a lot. So while we were generating this good, which goods were like high per capita income, employment, poverty alleviation, etc., we also started to generate some kind of bad. And what were those bad? Those bad were pollution, depletion, destruction of ecosystem, all of these. Somewhere we did not realize that probably all that good that we created by creating this bad has reached a level where actually the bad started to overrule the good. And today, if you see, most of that which we used, why did we cut the forest? Because we wanted to grow. Why did we pollute the river? Because we wanted more and more industrial growth. Now, all that what we have generated as our GDP is also been diverted, half of it, to clean all of those which we basically utilized to generate so much of GDP. So such kind of growth is actually known as uneconomic growth. So it no longer looks like an economic growth because all that you actually generated through your growth to achieve higher and higher per capita income, to achieve higher and higher standard of living, has to be now taken out, utilized for ensuring several things, including actually health. There has been a lot of studies which has spoken that today that we are in a situation of COVID is also because we have come too close with nature, particularly animals. Ideally, we are not supposed to because there is some kind of virus which people cannot tolerate. That is why the forest used to keep them there, and we have our own habitat, they have their own habitats. We destroyed their habitat to the extent that they had no place and we came too close. And today, just see what is the situation with our economic growth. Globally, if you look at the situation with economic growth, is such that all the countries have to use all that they had, accumulated with so much of growth in ensuring that their population live a healthy life. So much money has to be spent in vaccinating, in creating vaccines, in doing research, only because all of that which was given to us by nature was destroyed to the extent that most of this seems to be now uneconomic in nature from an economics point of view as well. So if you talk about something, so I'm going to first go to this slide because it is linked to this. So when I'm talking about, again, these are some of the curves and figures which we are very familiar to as an economist. We always come across this. Law of diminishing marginal utility, law of increasing marginal cost. So what we have learned is the left side of the diagram. So what we see is that when you start producing your economic growth, your marginal utility, the last utility that you derive from each additional growth process that you are bringing in, remains very high. However, more and more you are utilizing your natural resources, your utility starts coming down, your disutility starts coming up. What do we mean by disutility here? It means basically that first you will take away some 5% of the forest of your country, then 10, then 15, then 20, then 80. So when you reach 80, the utility that you have achieved by cutting the last, tree is probably negative. Then this utility has become too high. Now the problem is you should actually stop at the point where your MU, marginal utility, becomes equal to your marginal disutility. That is how we always speak about, isn't it? MC equal to MR is the stop rule. So if you look at it from a macroeconomy point of view, your economic limit should be there, where your marginal utility is equal to your marginal disutility. Because if you move beyond that point, okay, then you are basically moving towards a place where your marginal disutility is increasing, and you may reach a position or a point where you have damaged your ecosystem to a point that it is irreversible damage. And let me tell you, we have actually reached to some extent that point already. Some of the marine life, some of the animals, some of the trees, some of the forest resources, some of the water resources has gone to that extent, and including your wetlands are not there anymore. Even if you try to invest as much as you can never get them back. What nature provides you and what we plant is very different. This is something I really want to tell you very clearly, that, let me also take the example of my own institution, IIT. I don't know how many of you have come to IIT. If you see, it looks very beautiful. It has a lot of forest. It has a lot of greenery. People come here and they say, okay, it looks as if you are not in Assam, you are somewhere else. But let me tell you one thing. Many of these plantations we have done later. But there are some trees which hasn't been chopped off, has been restored. Those are different trees. Those are big, huge trees. The air that you get from those trees is different than the one we have planted. Because the one which we have planted are trees which are being planted just for the benefit, because we want it to grow quickly. They also drink a lot of water. But which nature provides you, it provides you that plant at that particular place because it is best suited to be there. So this is one of the most important things we need to keep in mind, that we have to grow. We do need economic growth. We can't say that we will go back to bullock cart kind of era. But we also need to understand vis-a-vis the cost that we are paying for it, right? So this is something we need to keep in mind, because most of the time we feel that our marginal utility is still very low. We can still keep on growing because the disutility and utility hasn't reached yet, hasn't intersected yet. And why that confusion? That confusion is because when in microeconomics we have an optimal scale, right? We know that when is the stop rule? The stop rule is when MC is equal to MR. No farm is going to produce if your MC is greater than MR. Your marginal cost is higher than marginal revenue. I'm not going to explain these terms. Dr. Upasana, do I have to explain? Because I expect most of them are from economics, right?
Yes, ma'am. They have, I think they should have the knowledge about this.
Yeah. Just for the benefit of those, and marginal is the last unit. And so what we say is that when the production of the cost incurred to produce the last unit is exactly equal to the revenue that we generate by selling that last unit in the market. Once we reach that level, I'm not talking about the total cost and total revenue, that's the last. That's where we stop. Otherwise, if we continue doing that, that means that your cost of producing the last unit is higher than the revenue that you have achieved. So no rational producer would continue. While this firm level, optimal scale or firm level equilibrium condition is well understood and always been taught to us from the time when we were student, and I'm sure you are also learning it now, we have not at all focused on the stop rule at the macro level. Now, it is possible that across India, all of these farms are maybe at the MC equal to MR situation. So we are not worried because we feel that, okay, they are all doing well, even if there are some kind of externalities as pollution, which the environmental economist does, we are taking care of it by asking them to pay tax or asking them to reduce the production whatsoever. But what we tend to forget, if there are 10,000 such polluting farms who are at MC equal to MR, what is happening at the macro level? Have we already crossed the capacity of the macro economy to be able to sustain so many firms at the micro level, although they are at the equilibrium state? So the default rule continues to be grow forever. There is a lot of literature around, limits to growth. I don't know if you have heard of it. There is something called limits to growth. From classical economics to neoclassical economics, we are talking about whether we should be happy if we get to know tomorrow that we cannot grow forever. Keep these questions in mind when we come to the discussion session. I would like to hear from you. What is your opinion? I mean, do you think that if an economy stops growing forever and it halts, but everybody has everything to eat, everybody has a job, everybody is doing well, everybody is aware, everybody is talking about it. Individually, we ask, what is going on with the economy? It is only growing by 7%. But what is that we are trying to achieve? Where do we want to reach? What is our larger goal? When are we going to say that, fine, we have achieved everything, now we don't need any growth? I would suggest you to look at the economic growth of some of the developed world, for example, Sweden, for example, Netherlands. You will not see that they are growing at the rate of 10%. They are probably growing at the rate of 2% or 1.5%. But are they poor economies? No, rich economies. How they manage to do it? Are they still extracting resources? No, but still they are doing well. These are some of the things that we need to think of. Probably India hasn't reached that stage yet, but are we ever going to reach? That's where our mindset needs to change. Okay, coming back to what we were discussing, this is one very interesting diagram, which I usually like to show it in my class as well. It's a situation where we say that how we started and where we ended up. The one on the top, we call it as an empty world. What is an empty world? It is a world where you had a large amount of ecosystems, or I would say environmental products or capital. You had ponds, clean lakes, you had forests, you have a lot of, coral reef, everything was intact, given to you by, if you believe in God, by God. Okay, and we call it as natural capital. That is the whole green part. And if you look at the arrow which shows ecosystem services, the welfare, the arrow is very fat here. Why? Because that time we had clean air, we had there, I don't remember seeing any big, filter in my grandparents' house to clean the water. They just boil it at times and they will drink it. And that they are boiling not because there are chemicals, they're boiling it because of mud and several other things. It is only now we have very hi-fi filters to drink water. So that time, the welfare from the ecosystem services, from the environment was very, very high. Why? Because your green portion was high, but your economic service, which is the pink color box, is your man-made capital. This is where your, your overbridge, your market as in malls, your cinema halls, your office buildings, several things, whichever you are building or your roads, for example. All of these are still at a very nascent stage. And I remember my father telling me that, there was such a system that he came to know that he had a brother after 2 months, because it took so much time for them to even reach him to inform him that, oh, now you have a brother too. So that was the life they were living at the time. Of course, it wasn't good. They were not happy. For my father to come from Cotton College to, to his house in Jorhat, it used to take him 2.5 days because so much of a difficulty to travel. He didn't like it, neither his parents liked it, nor my grandparents. So what we wanted a better world. How did we want a better world? Should be well connected, everybody can reach quickly. And so with all that good intention, we started to grow. But somewhere we forgot that we are growing too fast and too big. We forgot that there is an ecosystem which is surrounding us. And now if you look at the full world situation, it's a totally different thing. Your services from the ecosystem arrow has become thin, because you can't even open the glass of your car. You need an AC because it is too polluted. Forget about the heat. And even in a winter day also, when it is not hot, you still need your glasses to be rolled up because of pollution. You cannot drink water from the tap directly. It is impossible. You might get some kind of disease. So what happened? Ecosystem service arrow became thin, whereas your economic service arrow became fat. No doubt about it. We are definitely living in a very well-connected world. We have now, the way I am speaking to you through our virtual world, it was impossible, even 30 years back, probably, the way we are connected today. So all of these things came in to us, but at what cost? The cost is we replace this natural capital by something called man-made capital, to the extent that what we got is economic services, but very less now ecosystem services. And today we are having this conversation because we want to go back to the empty world, isn't it? We are now saying that restore it, bring it back. What we did wasn't right. So this is what is the irony. Okay, we started from somewhere and we want to go back there again, because now we realize that continued growth has actually led us to a situation where the opportunity cost of what we lost is huge, tremendous. Okay, I want to here also, give you an example with this slide. One of the interesting things which, when I was doing my PhD, I did with my supervisor is, he used to always give us a game where he would distribute some kind of ships to some of the groups, like 4 groups, and it would say that, okay, so you are fishermen, you have 2 ships given to, equally distributed to all the 4 groups, 2 ships, 2 ships, 2 ships, 2 ships, and you have a river where you go for fishing. So everybody starts their business with the initial amount of investment that has been given to them by the bank, and they go with 2 ships to the river to fish out fish. First, so when they come back, they get a lot of fish. They are very happy. They also realize that 2 ships is not enough, because there's so much fish there in the river. We need more. And then they go for, maybe everybody together decides, or alone they decide to go for 3 or 4. However, there will be 1 or 2 who are too greedy. They felt that, well, these others have got only 3 ships. Let me increase my fleeting size and let me get 6. So like that, 2 or 3 goes and buys 6 fleeting ships with a huge fleeting size. Now they go to the river. But after a few months or weeks, they see that the number of fish has dropped, to the extent that once when they send, all the 6 ships comes back empty, no fish available in the river. Now they want to sell off their ships because they feel that it's no longer a profitable business. Nobody wants to buy their ships because there is no fish. Why would anybody buy ship? What does it tell us? It tells us that you had a man-made capital, which is ship. Now you were given a natural capital, which is fish. You basically thought that without investing on the fish, you can just construct your man-made capital and you will continuously get your natural capital. So you thought that man-made capital can substitute your natural capital, whereas you should have looked at it that they are complementary to each other. If there is no natural capital, there is no use of man-made capital, right? So this kind of a concept from the point of view of sustainability, when you think that you can substitute this capital, natural capital by man-made capital, which is what most of the countries follow as a sustainable development path, is known to be weak sustainability. Why we call it as a weak sustainability? Because your total capital is high. You may have destroyed trees, you may have destroyed water, you may have destroyed several things, but you're replacing it with some other form of capital. So if I am adding all these capital, my total capital continues to be high. But if I want to follow a strong sustainability path, it is difficult, because I have to understand that natural and man-made capital are non-substitutable, they're complementary. I will definitely go for man-made capital, but I will also ensure that I will only destroy or only capture or only encroach that much of natural capital, which is utterly important for me to ensure the well-being of everyone. And then in strong substitutability rule, you will basically include that how much of your natural resources has been depleted to increase your man-made capital. And then probably your GDP will also be lesser. So you need to have something called green GDP. It's coming up now. There are a lot of people are doing it. Even India has done. But if you do this green GDP, you would see that your actual GDP is very low because you take into account your uneconomic growth as well. Okay, so this is also something that we need to understand. Now, so I'm going to give you an example of one of the work that I have done. Very quickly, I want to show you another very interesting thing that we study in circular flow model. Very much familiar to all of you that, there's a household, there is a farm, and household gives its labor and farms gives its product. And then this is like keeps flowing, and everything seems to be interesting. Later, we included, export, import, banks, everything, but it is always a circular flow. But then now we realize, well, it is not actually circular because there are other things which we are not looking at. There are natural resources coming in, pollution from the household, but where are you throwing the pollution? Where are you getting it? Is labor the only factor of production? Unfortunately, it continues to be in economics, land, labor, capital. We don't bring in water, we don't bring in forest, right? Why? Because we feel, again, it's a circular flow and land, labor, capital is the only problem, only thing that we need to focus on. So this is one part of this. So I want to very quickly bring in an example, which is the issue of climate change. All of this has resulted into one problem. So far, the problem was a problem of source. We were degrading our natural resources, forest, water. These are our natural resources, natural capital given to us by nature. We were degrading it. This we call it a source. Now we are also having a problem which is sink problem. We don't know where are we going to put our garbage. Climate change is nothing but a sink problem. The CO2s are nothing but sink. All your production processes is creating a gas which is not supposed to be so much in the nature, but you are basically accumulating it and you have destroyed your forests, which are actually the sink for carbon dioxide. Now, where will these go? And there are visible signs of the impact of this climate change and your sink problem. Sea level rise, increase in global temperature, glacier melt, shift in seasonal calendars, in the sense that earlier at the time when you used to sow, there will be no rain. Now there are rains, vector-borne diseases, and extreme events, something very important that you see now. Cyclones, floods, droughts are happening very frequently. These are the impact of your climate change. So, and it is also considered to be a kind of an externality. I will not go too much into detail of this. Basically, it is something like it is a byproduct of a production process. We don't want to create climate change, but it's a byproduct, right? But we do not know how to get rid of it. There is no market mechanism, no policy which can actually internalize it. And it is one such problem which is probably not affecting us at the moment as much as it is going to affect the future generation. So it also challenges your concept of sustainability. Okay? Very quickly, a framework which was produced by IPCC. I don't know how many of you are familiar to IPCC. We call it as an intergovernmental panel for climate change. If you look at this diagram, it basically speaks about that if you want to understand or reduce the impact of climate change, or we call it as a climate risk, you have to reduce the hazard itself, reduce floods. Do something that the floods doesn't happen. Do something that cyclone doesn't happen. Reduce exposure, meaning remove those people who are highly exposed to those events. Do not let them stay, for example, in flood-prone areas. And or else you reduce vulnerability. And what is this vulnerability? The propensity of their getting affected. Now, one can focus on mitigation. Mitigation will help you in removing the hazard. And one can focus on adaptation, which will help you in reducing the vulnerability. So we did a very interesting study with IIT Mandi to understand at the pan-India level where different states of India today stands in terms of climate change vulnerability. which state is most vulnerable to this changing climate or change, like whether it's flood, whether it's cyclone, or any kind of extreme event. This is, I'm not going to, so we took several indicators for the state level assessment. I am interested to show you this, and you will be surprised to see that Assam, one of the states where we belong, actually falls under a high vulnerability category. Why is it so? Because Assam is one of such states which has several issues. For example, it is a state which has low per capita income, which has high percentage of BPL family, which has a sensitive health sector, meaning we do not really have a very good health system in place. Lack of forest, our forest cover, which used to be very good at some point of time, we have degraded it. High prevalence of rain-fed agriculture. Why it is important? Because if climate changes, your agriculture vulnerability increases, because it will not rain when it needs to rain. It will rain when it does not need to rain, and it makes your agriculture highly vulnerable. Okay, all of these indicators, plus the impact of changing climate together, is making our state highly vulnerable. So this is one thing that clearly shows that while on one hand, we always were known to be, one of the states which is not one of the economically highly progressive state, at the same time, we have an added concern now, and that is climate vulnerability or climate change or climate variability. Another interesting thing we've also found was when we did a district level analysis, we moved further down and we did it, forget the states. Let's see which district is most vulnerable. Unfortunately, Karimganj, Gwalpara, Dhuburi, Darang, Sanitpur, Golaghat, all of these states, all of these states came as highly vulnerable state districts, and which shows one of the reasons why Assam is highly vulnerable is because several of the districts are falling under a range of high vulnerability. So Bihar, Assam, these two states, unfortunately, out of 612 districts, most of these, you can see so many districts of Assam are actually falling under the high vulnerability range, and which means that we are in trouble. This has been already published and has been given to this was funded by Department of Science and Technology, and this has been sent to the state departments. We had several, dialogues and discussions, and of course, state have acknowledged this work and they are planning to work around it, but a lot needs to be done. Now, let me go back to our discussion. So keeping all of these things in the background, what are we trying to now do is, we have so many challenges. We have destroyed our ecosystem, no doubt about it. The reason I titled the presentation as now or never, ideally I should have somewhere written, probably never we can restore some of the damages. But I didn't want to be so pessimist, and I didn't want you to be so pessimist, because you are a younger generation and you have to work for it. So maybe we still have a scope, we still have a chance if we all work together and try and understand and relook at the way we look at the economy-environment relationship. I very strong the left side to show from a full world to the empty world, we need to look at everything from a source to sink approach. We cannot simply say that, okay, we need to clean the rivers. We also need to understand, are we utilizing too much water? What is happening to our groundwater? It is not only about cleaning the dirt that we have created, it is also thinking how much of the source we are depleting, how much of the sink we are depleting, because now we are in a situation we have depleted both. Okay? We also somewhere need to do a lot of research and understanding, and since you would be moving ahead in your career, you should also now need to think, should we only do the business as usual research, or we need to think beyond? We should think, how can we develop a macroeconomy stock rule? Okay, there are works going on across the world, but I still feel in India we haven't really done enough, because we still are ruled too much with our neoclassical way of looking at economy-environment relationship, and we as an economist get threatened when that is questioned somewhere. Opportunity cost of degrading the environment needs to be calculated and understood. If economists understand number, give them the number. Only then they will understand that what they are losing in terms of growth too, when they are depleting the natural capital. We need to focus on strong sustainability path. A lot of countries are doing. There are ways of doing it. We need to adopt some of those policies that they have. We need to also appreciate our economy, which will eventually lead to a steady state economy. Let's not keep questioning as an individual too, why is our economy not growing? Let's stop doing that. Instead, let's ask the right question. Why are we not able to breathe clean air? Why are we not able to see clean rivers? Why are we not able to restore our wetlands? Or where are those wetlands? I think very few of us ask these questions. Let us be honest to each other. We do not. But what bothers most to us is, do we have a good mall? Can we go and see a movie in the multi-complex? Isn't it true? And it holds true for me also. I'm not saying that I don't do it. But this is where we need to change our mindset. Most important is our economic syllabus, our economic curriculum. It needs to evolve. What we studied is what you are studying too. World has changed. Things have changed. Looking at the world also needs to be changed, and looking at the economy also needs to change. But we are not changing it. We need more and more interdisciplinary approach in every discipline that we study. We should be a master of a discipline, but we need to also understand and respect other disciplines. And that holds true for both social scientists and natural scientists. And I think only then we can actually think of restoring our ecosystem, because this is not about it's not like, giving a command, you do this, you restore it. No, it has to come from your heart. You have to believe it, that yes, it needs to be done. Only then we will be able to actually achieve what this particular UN goal is all about, that it is asking us to restore our ecosystem. So, Dr. Upasana, I'm going to stop here. And if you have any questions from the students, I'll be very happy to interact.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Anamika Borua, for enlightening us with such a thought-provoking presentation. So rightly you have mentioned that we are economically developing with the passage of time, and also leading to a very well-connected world. But it is at the cost of damaging or reducing the balance of our ecosystem. So rightly you have mentioned. Thanks a lot for your presentation, such a thoughtful presentation. Hope all we are benefited a lot. Now we have a small interaction session. So to carry out this interaction session, I would like to request Dr. Ananta Pegu, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to initiate the session.
Thank you, Vadu. Thank you, ma'am. Very warm evening to all the participants. First, I would like to thanks to our today's resource person, Dr. Anamika Borua from IIT Guwahati, for our wonderful session on ecosystem restoration, now or never. So we can realize that from growing population, industrialization, economic development, year after another year, how we are losing ecosystem. Really, it's thought-provoking. So thank you, Vadu, for a wonderful session. Our resource person has pointed out a very crucial point regarding ecosystem restoration, reimagination, and restore. Ma'am, talk on how ecosystem we are losing and how we are trying to restore it. So, ma'am nicely pointed out the relationship between economic activities and ecosystem and their impact on environment. Ma'am pointed out the natural capital and versus man-made capital and many more. So now I would like to invite a question from any participant or dear student. If any question, so ma'am can reply it, please.
Participants are requested to interact.
I think there is a query from Aman.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aman has raised his hand, I think.
Avinash, Dipankar.
think they are not getting.
Avinash, any question?
No, sir. Hello?
It is absolutely fine. It is absolutely fine. I mean, this is okay. I mean, don't feel that students are not asking questions. See, it is the same situation in IIT also. Not that I feel that the students are not interested to ask or interested into the talk. I sometimes feel that some of the things that we say is also for them to recollect and think, what actually we are talking about, and that is the purpose of this talk. But I would like to actually tell one thing. Okay, where do we stand by the end of this UN decade on ecosystem restoration? There is a question, and very good one. Yeah, so can I, Nitumani Bora has asked this question, that where do we stand by the end of this UN decade on ecosystem restoration? Nitumani, the thing is, it's difficult to say. It's a very difficult question, actually. I wish I could answer your question. The whole idea is the reason why these themes are given for these different environment day is like the way today I came up and I spoke about it, and the way you are also thinking and asking this question itself is an indication that, we have now started to understand that, this ecosystem matters. The idea is not that in 1 year, by the end of this year, when next year we'll have another theme, in 1 year we'll be able to restore it. It's not possible. But keeping this as a theme, several UN organizations, several government organizations, and also several education institutions have initiated courses, policies, different interventions, so that eventually it would lead to some kind of a restoration. But to assume that it will happen now, immediately, overnight is impossible, cannot, because it will take time. So the first thing is that I always feel that the first thing is to accept that we have done a mistake. Then only we will be able to move ahead. So such themes actually makes us realize that yes, these ecosystems are important. We need to bring them back. It plays a significant role in our life. And then only you can start preparing to improve it. And let me tell you honestly that today, for example, your college is holding this seminar, an excellent seminar, I would say. And I was so happy to hear the kind of discussion that happened in the beginning. Itself shows that there is so much of awareness and so much of understanding among each one of us. What I probably feel is we need is a push. And that push happens, it helps. Like we have already planted a tree. Even in IIT, we planted several trees today. Itself is a contribution. One tree, one person in this country plants, imagine how many trees we are planting. So that's one step at a time. Difficult to answer your question, where do we stand by the end of this UN decade? But I too feel we will be doing a lot. We are already doing a lot. But at the same time, we also have to relook at our economic process. It is not okay that you are planting 10 trees and somewhere else you are chopping another 20. And that doesn't help. Okay, you have to make sure that we go together. It has to be a holistic move. Everybody has to move together.
Professor Barua.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I personally learned a lot from your presentation. And what struck me indeed was the way you explained, particularly the climate change part. As you said, that's a source to sink problem. And yes, it's very true that we cannot stop now the way we have evolved ourselves. Industrial growth, revolution or growth is something which cannot be stopped. And as an output from each of such mechanisms or dynamisms, we get to see some products. And here in this case, some of the products are for our benefit, and at the same time, some products are not of our utility, and which goes on to affect our atmosphere and other parts of the overall environment. Now, as you said, yes, sequestration, I think, is a nice way out. So by which we can probably put the wastage into some sinks. So can you highlight on this part basically? because as a student of art science, I understand about the carbon sequestration. And in other aspects, can you say something on this regard, please?
You mean to say sync, looking at this whole climate change as
Yeah,
a sync?
Sync part. We learn about the carbon dioxide sequestration. Many attempts have been made also all across the world to sequester the carbon dioxide, even beneath the sea also. But that has also led to some other ancillary problems like generating earthquakes and all. But then, have we evolved? The academia has evolved any good sequestration model or system by which there is no side effect as such?
Actually, not really. I mean, of course, a lot of research is going on, like you very rightly pointed out that, now we are also trying to put them under the seabed, and it is happening in some of the places because you want to reduce it and you want to capture it, carbon capture and storage, that's what they call it. You capture it and you store it inside the seabed. So, we don't really know, frankly speaking, what kind of implication 50 years down the line this is going to have. However, now what so as you know, when you talk about climate change, we have one aspect. This is on mitigation. You are trying to basically ensure that you are able to mitigate the emission completely. However, where I think the focus has now gone, and what the IPCC is also trying to talk about, is that, how do you make your entire production process clean? If you are making your production process clean, you are automatically reducing your, emission. And if you are reducing your emission, your CO2 emission comes down, you're capturing the CO2 and storing it also will eventually start coming down. But unfortunately, the way every country for that matter, let me tell you, it's not India. And honestly speaking, developing countries like India, only now there is an understanding that our contribution to CO2 emission is going to increase the way we are now developing. But harm was done much more time, years before, when India wasn't even contributing to CO2 emission as such. However, problem is all of these green, growth processes continues to be looked up as a very expensive production processes, because in most of the cases, the different technology, the green technology that we call, are patented. And if you use those green technology in your country, the idea is that the cost of production of those technology will go up. And so if you look at even now, India's production processes, we still, utilize a lot of coal-based, production processes.
Yes.
Whereas I have always argued this in several other forums, is that the reason why coal seems to be cheaper, compared to the greener form of energy, for example, be it, hydropower, be it wind, be it solar, is because we are only looking at coal's, cost of production in terms of a very economic point of view, like again, land, labor, and capital. But if you look at, say, the environmental degradation that the coal does, the loss of life that coal brings in, all of this, if you bring into the cost of production, the coal actually is much more expensive compared to the other greener production processes. So that is one thing we haven't been able to capture yet. But of course, there is a pledge, which we, in the recent agreement in the Climate Change Forum, which we call it as a Paris Agreement, there even Government of India has pledged that we are going to bring our CO2 emission and all of those things. If we are able to stick to that pledge which we have given, which is difficult, honestly speaking, but still, if we are able to invest on hydropower, in wind, and in all of that the government is talking about, there is a hope. But what you have spoken about, we still do not really have a very clear answer, because, unfortunately, there is a lot of faith even now on technology. Somewhere we still believe that all our problem, all our bad deeds can be taken care of via technology. But so what happens when you have so much faith on your technology? You feel that, I don't have to change my way of doing things because the technology will clean it up. So that's where I see a big problem, that's where. And the thing I also want to add here, because the students are also there, what I always say, that what we consume is what is produced. Our demand is something which is producing that product. So we need to be very conscious consumers. What are we consuming? is very important. My students keeps asking, ma'am, what is that small thing that I can do to reduce CO2 emission? I tell them, switch off your light and switch off your fan when you are leaving the room. You know, don't keep your engine on when you are waiting in a traffic light. Okay, so therefore, I think every one of us is in some or other way is responsible in what we are today, and we are the one who has to clean it up. That's the most important message. I can see one question from.
Thank you. As you say,
please go.
as you were saying that hydroelectricity is better than coal. That's very true. Well, in this context, I'd just like to ask you that whether from economics point of view, is there any system of developing a model where we basically can ascertain the extent of natural capital? Say, from the point of view of a project, say, for example, we are planning to do a project, okay, a hydroelectric power project in a certain area. So that means we are going to sculpture that area to our own interest. Now, whether that region, the natural capital of that region, whether we have taken into context that part, and whether do we actually compare with the output part, that here, what is the value of the natural capital, and in that comparison, the anthropogenic capital that we will earn from that. Whether is there any model like that which you use before you plan a project and execute?
Yes. So the subject that I'm talking about, so there is something called ecosystem valuation. So what we do is basically in this particular, it's not exactly, you can run a model, there are ecosystem models where you can put these as inputs, but basic concept is this. Usually, so far in environment economics, we used to use cost benefit principle. You know, the cost, how much is the cost in installing something, and what is the vis-a-vis benefit. If the benefit from that hydropower is high, then you go ahead it. Now the problem is, what are those who are looking as cost? Now if you're only including the cost which is visible, but suppose when you are installing something, you are taking away a large amount of land, if you're taking away a large amount of forest, you are taking away a large amount of ecosystem, if that cost is not embedded in that cost that you are calculating, then naturally the benefit will seem to be very high. And that is the biggest problem when you look at the environmental impact assessments of all of these projects. What happens is that the methodology is so old, the inputs that are taken as environmental input is so old that it basically shows that you have kind of diluted your environment to the cost, the value of a tree is equal to the value of your chair. That's how we are calculating, you know. So unless we do away with those methodologies, because there are many better methodologies where very clearly it comes out and shows that what actually is the value of a forest land. You know, there are inputs, there are methodologies which can help you in calculating these. Then, of course, it would look that the cost is high and the benefit is low, but I'm not saying that we should not have those hydropower plants, but we may not need to have such a huge hydropower plant. We can probably reduce, like one of my friends has just recently told me that you would basically want to have a groundwater, extract some groundwater from an area. Now that area has community. Community doesn't want that groundwater extraction to happen here. They want you to go 2 steps ahead or below or far off. Your water might come a little lesser, but the benefit is high because the community benefit although you have sacrificed 2 liters of water because of moving away. So that kind of methodologies we are yet not using. Our environmental assessments are very poor. Now abroad, mostly in other countries also, there are environmental implications of any kind of such intervention you do. But why the protests are so high in India? It is because A, the way we are assessing is not correct. The way we are looking at natural capital is not correct. And B, we are not transparent. We want to hide it. We don't want to tell them what is the actual loss. Once we do this, I am sure, everybody will understand why we need these kind of hydropower, and we don't really need such a huge hydropower. That's something I think we all need to, focus on, understand. But there are methods, Dr. Gaur. I can send you some papers if you're interested. There are definitely methods to calculate these things.
Yeah,
Okay, so there
basically,
is
if you see, when we look at this,
please go ahead. Yeah.
if you look at these hydropower projects, we are able to say we are happy that these hydropower projects can generate these 1,000 megawatts. So that way we are able to quantify the extent of benefit that we are going to get. But at the same time, if you look at the Himalayan rivers, the health of the Himalayan rivers, the ecosystem therein, okay, and then add to that the downstream impact that has in the economy as well as the ecology and culture of the tribes or the population that thrives there. I think that valuation has not been done. So
Absolutely.
that is something which is really
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
need of the hour.
Yeah, very true. Yes. So there are some questions. Let me just quickly try to, put them together and answer. It says how to increase the effectiveness of institutional policy of nature protection and biodiversity, how global warming process have impact on freshwater resources. Okay, Sonu Kumar's question about institutional policy. So the thing is, we do have some policies. I don't know if you're aware that India is one such country who first India had this whole Water Act. Okay, it was the first country, 1975, we had it. But the problem is not policy, as I see. We have very good national water policy also. We have very good forest policies also. The problem is implementing it, and as your sir has mentioned, the issue is when you want to replace something with another thing, the issue is here that, what is more important? Should we do away with our agricultural land and build infrastructure like housing? Or which is more important? That is where the whole. So I always say that we live in a world. Why economies work? Economies work because we have limited resources, alternative uses, right? That's what we learn. Which is that use which is most important? How do we know that? That is where so far environment has always taken a backseat. We always feel that, first we need to remove hunger, first we have to remove poverty, we have to, for all of these, we need an economic growth. What we tend to forget is these people whose poverty and hunger you are removing are the one who depends most on the environment. So by removing the environment, by taking away the agricultural field, by taking away several resources on which they depend, you are actually making them more poor and more vulnerable. This is where I think somewhere our balance has been lost. So I would not say that we need more policies, but yes, the policies need to be implemented, which is where I think a lot of work needs to be done. It's again, like going back to what I said, it's about looking at environment from a different perspective, not looking at it only something which is there for us to be used. Environment also has an aesthetic use, an aesthetic meaning it should be there because it makes you feel good. Like I have trees behind my house, I feel good. It may not be doing anything to me, there are mosquitoes, but still it looks good, So that's something we need to understand. And you have asked me one more question. From an economic point of view, we are always taught about opportunity cost. If we need development, we have to forego nature. And India is a developing country, and if we wish to grow, we have to increase our industrialization. Now, those countries who are already developed, okay. So to this is a question which always comes. Okay, you can read something called environmental Kuznets curve, if you're interested, where we talk about this. So my answer to this question is, what those people did, why they did, because they didn't have an example, what are they going to see 50 years down the line? We have an example. We know what those countries did, and they polluted their environment. They have less population. They were able to manage their growth of population, so they are able to restore their environment too. We are even in a more difficult situation. We are growing since, I don't know, when I was in school, also I remember we are talking about growth rates. We are still growing, and we have been continuing to grow. My question to you is, I would like you to look up India's economic growth vis-a-vis how much India has been reduced its poverty. How many people have been able to brought back out from the poverty? Is it really going similarly? You will see there is a lot of inequality. What economics basically have now able to see is this. On one hand, our per capita income has grown. Probably the head count of poor people have come down, but the inequality between the rich and the poor has gone up like anything, which we call it as a Gini coefficient. If you do your Gini coefficient, you will see that gap has increased like anything. That means that people are not dying of hunger probably the way they used to, but why there is so much of inequality? So if you look at per capita consumption of environmental products like energy, our energy consumption is so skewed that some people, you need to increase their footprint. They need more energy because they don't even have electricity in their houses. Whereas some people are utilizing more. So there is a lopsided development. So I personally don't see that we need so much energy, we need so much resources. It is unfortunate that a large is going to one section of the society where it hasn't yet reached the needy. So we always use this needy to say that we need more growth, we need more industrialization. But our development hasn't been very, equity hasn't happened yet. So now we need to stop, look, see, okay, we have so much money now, how do we equally distribute it? How we make sure that most of these people get what we have been able to achieve. And finally, we have better technologies now. If you still follow and believe that technology can help, when those countries developed during the Industrial Revolution, they were only depending on coal, but we don't have to. We have better technology, so we don't have to follow their growth process. We can still grow and do a good job than what they did by following a greener path. That's what I would tell you. All right. Will development of robotics and smart technology solve the problem of dramatically increasing environmental pollution of natural ecosystems? Yeah, of course. I mean, technology do play a role. I am not saying that it would not. It has been playing. But let's not overly be confident over technology. Like, it's not possible. Your emotions, technology cannot understand. Can they understand? They can only capture certain bit of it. But they can never capture your some of the happiness that you would get, and those happiness that you get by seeing a good environment will never come to the market. So how do you value it then, right? So yes, lastly I would say, very interesting questions, very nice to see that you are thinking. I want you to continue thinking on this whole year and do something small to contribute and say, I tried to restore something nearby in my house or outside or in your college. I wish this wouldn't have been virtual. Unfortunately, it is virtual, but I hope I will see you and meet you all sometime soon. And let's hope that things improve. And we can,
definitely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
I think there is no more queries now. So now we are at the end of our program. Now I request Nitumoni Bara to offer her vote of thanks. Nitumoni?
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. I deem it a great honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks in this memorable occasion. First and foremost, I take immense pleasure in extending my sincere thanks to the speaker of today's talk, Dr. Anamika Borua, Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati, who despite her busy schedule has found time to grace this occasion. Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening us with a very informative and dynamic talk based on practical experience. We are grateful to our principal, Dr. K.C.Das Borua sir, for his constant support and words of encouragement. I thank Dr. Runjun Fukon ma'am, coordinator, IQAC and vice principal, for her endless moral support. I also thank Dr. Upahana Chakraborty ma'am, HOD Economics and organizing secretary of this event, for her continuous effort and time in organizing such an effective event that is highly relevant in today's environmental scenario. I thank all the faculties of Department of Economics, Dr. Ananto Begu sir and Ms. Bonali Hoikia for their valuable contribution in making this event a grand success. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all my colleagues and all the faculties from different institutions, the student fraternity and alumni of our college for their cooperation in making this event a memorable success. Last but not the least, I owe special gratitude to Mr. Tony Bayon and Mr. Opubbo Haloy for their technical support in smoothly conducting this event. Thank you all. Over to you, Upahana ma'am.
Thank you, Nutumoni. Thank you once again, all the participants. Special thanks goes to our speaker, Madam Dr. Anamika Barua. Definitely this time we have met virtually, so hope we will meet in offline too in near future. So with that good hope, I think we should wind up today's program.
Yes.
Sir, Principal
Professor
Sir,
Anamika, it was
I think,
very nice listening to you. It was a pleasure, in fact.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure
It
too
was
for me.
pleasure
Thank you
indeed.
so much. Yeah. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
So now we are going to wind up the session. Thank you again, also.